One thing that I find very interesting about the path that your team has taken with this open source strategy is that with both of these projects, you have donated them to two different open source software foundations. I think a lot of the stuff that you said earlier, with the commitment to transparency, these kinds of things, it really aligns with those values, and it kind of even goes a step further than if we're just working on them in your own like GitHub project, for instance. I have so many questions along this front, but maybe what I'll start with is going that step further something that has had concrete business impact, or is it more of a more just value alignment?
So I think today I would say that what I've experienced with our business is that the value has certainly been more abstract and less concrete. But I do think it's there. I think there is kind of this subtle but important kind of kind of value through credential, kind of value through reputation that has helped us to maybe grow faster than we might have otherwise. And I think this is especially true for enterprise contributions, which is something I think every open source project is excited to get. And it was one of my learnings talking with one of our mentors at the Apache Software Foundation, Sharon Foga, who's a wonderful woman. She really kind of educated me on some of the kind of more subtle values of foundation participation. And one of those, which really stood out to me, was that there's actual kind of legal protections that come for the contributors if they're making contributions to an Apache project or a CNCF project, right? Versus one that is in kind of open source no man's land. And this was kind of an epiphany for me in realizing that, yeah, like if you're some enterprise dev making a contribution to a project that isn't underneath the umbrella of a foundation and something disastrous happens, right? Like for whatever reason, you're responsible for like a huge enterprise data leak and it results in all these big lawsuits or even criminal prosecution, right? Somehow or another, you can find yourself exposed to that as a developer. Now, I don't think this happens all the time, right? But I think it's a real concern. And what I learned is that for the most part, I can't speak to the legal kind of subtleties of this, but my understanding is that that's one kind of really important thing that the foundation participation brings to the contributors who help evolve these projects, is it gives them that protection to know that if they're proceeding in good faith, making good contributions, they're never going to be punished for their good work, and I think that's underappreciated. One of the values that has come with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to learn more about the mechanics of that, because I was always under the impression that since open source is provided with there's no warranty given. I'm not familiar with the mechanics that could lead a contributor to wind up in trouble, but I see Matt groaning. Maybe you've seen
except
this before.
Potentially in Europe with the new legislations that are going on there.
Oh, interesting. Okay, maybe that's a topic for the next lawyer.
That's a whole nother deep dive. I mean, I think that there are some things from an Apache or a foundation perspective that you get as a contributor. Legal protections, I'm not 100% sure on either, because it is a lot of it's as is warranty. So we don't warranty it, use it at your own risk type of a thing. But I think that there is some potential comfort in obfuscation, right? Like you're behind the organization. You've got the, like if anybody goes after everybody, they're not going to go after you as an individual. They're going to go after the organization first or foremost. So I think there is some benefit to that.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
But what's maybe even more interesting about this is the donation to multiple foundations, which, Apache and CNCF are vastly different. And I don't know if you're a part of the decision on where to donate which of these, but when you're evaluating like which place each piece of software should end up, how do you make that decision?
Great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I certainly can't speak to why we chose each one. especially with DevStream, though I could talk to both. I was part of the decision, but not the decision maker. So I just want to kind of caveat my answer with that. But when we kind of came around to looking at this, there are a few important factors that really kind of played a significant role. The first and most basic, right, is where do we maybe already have relationships? And in our case with the Apache Foundation, we already had some users who were in the Apache Foundation. We developed some personal relationships with them who became mentors. They were kind of recruiting DevLake specifically. And then when we looked to see, like, okay, do we agree with them? We looked at things like what are the kind of focus areas and kind of values in that ecosystem, and do they align with our product? And I think what we looked at in Apache for DevLake that we liked what we saw was it did seem like there was a consistent kind of theme of kind of quantitative and kind of data-driven products that had kind of aspirations to be infrastructure that are focused on kind of enabling kind of developer productivity or, developer capabilities. And I think for us that aligned nicely with what we wanted DevLake to become and is in the process of becoming. So it was that kind of value alignment there that made it make sense. And with DevStream and CNCF, I think there were kind of two key factors that were the deciding piece there from my perspective. One very basic one, right, is it's better to get more exposure to a larger part of the community. And rather than putting all our eggs in one basket, it made sense to, go to a different foundation to be more visible. That's like a really simple but honest part of that equation. But I think on a higher level and more strategic with DevStream and CNCF, our vision for DevStream is that it can help developers discover like the best tools, right? And the best tools are inevitably part of the cloud infrastructure, the cloud native tools. And we felt like it was just going to be a good home for it, where if we could ultimately turn DevStream into this kind of access point to get the best of the CNCF ecosystem and beyond, and maximize their capabilities, and make sure they're discovering these things in a very crowded space, we felt like that would be a good home for it. So I think for us it came down to some basic personal things, some values things. We certainly looked at the nuances of the licenses. That's something I can't really speak to in much detail, but we're fortunate where we have a lawyer as one of our co-founders, Roland, who took a close look, worked with one of our mentors, Heather Meeker, who is a well-known expert in that space, to just really understand, are these licenses going to be kind of harmonious with our vision for what these things should become in and of themselves, as well as in the context of, our long-term company building. And thankfully, the answer to both seemed to point to yes, and we've been happy with the experiences on both ends so far.